MH370, 10 years on. Still haven't found it. You believe it?
Malaysia 370.
We were searching in completely the wrong place.
Did you feel shafted?
I was pissed off, yeah.
I think anybody that gets on an aeroplane would like to know that if something happened to them, that you would be able to find those people.
It's been 10 years. It's time to acknowledge that everything has failed, but that not everything has been tried.
It just feels like no one cares.
Are you ready to say it's not there?
Not at all. It's somewhere.
Do you think you could find it? Are you ready for it?
We're ready. That's our job, to be ready.
...2024 marks the 10-year anniversary since the Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 went missing. Despite the biggest and most expensive search in history, the aircraft, passengers and crew were never found. How does a modern aircraft with hundreds of people on board just vanish? And as the years have rolled by, the mystery has deepened, but a burning question remains. What will it take to find the plane? What does this anniversary mean to you?
This is a big one. It's a long 10 years. In some ways, it feels just like yesterday. Every year's hard, but for me, 10 years, it's the realisation how long this has taken to not have any answers.
Does it get any easier?
No, never gets easier, no. Not at all.
That's a nice photo.
Yeah, that's the official photo photographer takes, yeah.
In a Brisbane park, a family comes together to remember loved ones lost on Malaysian Airlines flight MH370.
That's nice in front of the waterfall, isn't it?
Yeah.
They moved to, Scotland and then moved to Toowoomba.
I didn't realise you guys lived in Toowoomba.
Hello. How are you? Nice to see you again, Peter.
For the last 10 years, Kathy and Bob Lawton have never been far from their thoughts.
I love these photos. I love that one.
Yeah.
Of Mum and
This one I like. And look at the date there.
Oh, wow. What was it? March 8.
Wow.
12.
2012. We need to raise this again to try and get the search started so that we can get those answers.
Yeah.
We need that finality for us, It's too hard.
And it's this time of year as well, isn't it?
It's okay.
It'll be all right, Landon.
You're doing well, love.
It's another anniversary, and it's always a difficult time of year.
Well, it's the build-up.
Yeah.
And look, I'm exactly the same every year. You still get that big thing in your stomach knowing the 8th of March is coming and, you suppress everything all year as much as we can and then
it comes.
Then it comes and it hits you and then you've got this horrible emotion to have to deal with.
For Glenda, Missy and Amanda, losing their parents has been the hardest thing imaginable. But little has changed when it comes to the need for a renewed search.
We just want the answers. We want to find where our parents are.
The date's just a reminder that they're not around still, 10 years on, and we still don't have the answers. We don't know the truth of what happened. We don't know where our loved ones are.
MH370, 10 years on. Still haven't found it. You believe it?
I just think it's shocking. I think it's appalling.
Are you ready to say it's not there?
Not at all. So it's somewhere. So there's no doubt about that. Exactly where, we don't know.
We need to find the airplane. It's got to be found. You cannot have a huge airliner. It's not a 737, it's a huge airliner. Just disappear. It can't happen.
On Saturday, the 8th of March 2014, Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 departed Kuala Lumpur for Beijing.
Weather conditions are fantastic. It's a really dark night and it's about 1:15 in the morning.
On board were 227 passengers and 12 crew.
Malaysian 370, Lumpur, radar, good morning. Climb flight level 250. Morning, level 250, Malaysian 370.
This was after midnight. Most people on board would have had their meal and be going to sleep.
Malaysian 370, maintaining level 350.
To all appearances, quite normal to start off with, until they got to the border area between the airspace in Malaysia and Vietnam.
40 minutes into the flight, a whole lot of things happened in very rapid succession.
As MH370 crosses from Malaysian to Vietnamese airspace, a final goodbye and some now infamous last words from pilot Captain Zahari Ahmed Shah.
Good night, Malaysia 370.
Good night, Malaysia 370 were the last words heard from anyone on that flight. And at the same time, the plane disappeared from radar screens.
That means you're not visible on civilian radar. Nobody can see where you are.
As soon as they signed off from Malaysia, the aircraft turned west and headed in a completely different direction.
MH370 lost contact with Subang Air Traffic Control this morning.
And that caused a great deal of confusion and panic among the controllers in Vietnam and Malaysia.
We believe family members should prepare themselves for the worst.
There was no mayday call or any sign of distress. MH370 was never heard from again.
Kathy and Bob.
Mum and Dad took Kathy to the airport for that plane that night.
And we knew it was going to be a little bit teary.
And they were the ones that got the last goodbyes, the last hugs and kisses.
And Kathy, Kathy came to me and she gave me a big cuddle. And it's the longest, tightest cuddle that she ever gave me. That's what I will remember. It was the best thing that ever happened to me, really.
Of the 239 people on board, 6 were Australian. They include retired friends from Brisbane, Rod and Mary Burrows, and Kathy and Bob Lawton.
Tell us about Kathy, first of all. When you think about her, what comes to mind?
She was our best friend. She was everything to us. It was such a big change, you know, once she was gone, not having that person to reach out to talk about, you know, your day, your feelings, life.
And what about Dad? Glenda, you?
He was such a larrikin. He was always making someone laugh.
He enjoyed a beer and it was good to share a beer with him. Yeah, it was good fun.
For Kathy and Bob Lawton, it was the trip of a lifetime. Malaysia, Thailand and China. They'd been planning and saving for years.
They went away on a holiday to have a great 5 weeks away together, you know, they worked very hard. They saved very hard. They downsized their house so that they could afford to pay for the trip, and they never got to enjoy what they really worked hard for.
The hunt for flight MH370 started in the waters around Malaysia. It was first thought the aircraft crashed soon after that final radio message.
Good night, Malaysian 370.
It quickly became a race to find any survivors. Tony Abbott was then Prime Minister.
I rang the Malaysian Prime Minister and I offered Australian assistance. At that stage, we thought that the plane had disappeared somewhere in the South China Sea.
At that stage, it was a search and rescue mission, and the world was watching on.
Relatives are staying close to airports in Beijing and Kuala Lumpur, awaiting any word of what's happened to their loved ones.
You were finding out, right, as the world was finding out. And what was it like to be in the eye of that storm?
Yeah, it was, I felt so numb, like I couldn't believe it. And we all just, gathered together and just was in shock.
It was a roller coaster, waiting for news, waiting on hope that they would be okay. It got to a point where I had to take a step back and not listen to what was actually going on.
That was the last known location, so our assumption is that the aircraft has probably gone down in South China Sea, and for whatever reasons that we cannot explain, we do not know.
The search covered millions of square kilometres, but there was no trace of missing MH370.
It's true that for the first few days we were searching in completely the wrong place. We were searching where the last sighting of the aircraft was made and the last contact was made.
We have not found any wreckage, no wreckage whatsoever.
It soon became clear MH370 didn't go down in the South China Sea. It kept on flying. Military radar picked up the Boeing 777 after it went dark. That is, after it vanished from air traffic control systems. The radar tells us the plane made a sharp left turn back across the Malaysian peninsula, and then it turned right up the Malacca Strait, all the while skirting international boundaries. Then disappeared out of range.
No one's monitoring in a live fashion the primary radar screens. Everyone's asleep on the ball. In fact, it turned out that the Thai air traffic controllers were paying attention, saw this aircraft, but thought, oh, well, it looks like it's going back into Malaysia, and decided it was Malaysia's responsibility. So if it was a deliberate tactic, that tactic worked. It confused the two countries' air traffic controllers.
The search had been underway a week when investigators found the airplane's communication systems had been shut down. It was a deliberate act, says Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak.
We can say with a high degree of certainty that the aircraft communications was disabled. These movements are consistent with deliberate action by someone on the plane.
So it was turned off by someone who did not want the aircraft tracked on civilian radar. 2 minutes after he said goodnight, it went dark. All the civil transponder, other comms, every ACARS, everything was suddenly switched on. That doesn't happen.
Investigators then found even more compelling evidence that would end the current search and move it thousands of kilometres.
We are ending our operations in South China Sea and reassessing the redeployment of our assets.
Jet engine maker Rolls-Royce received a series of signals from global satellite service Inmarsat. It was MH370.
And the way it works is that about every hour, there's a satellite handshake. The aircraft will send a signal to the satellite with data on it, and the satellite will respond.
And so they can measure the time that signal took to come from the satellite, down the aircraft, back to the satellite. It's all in microseconds, but it means you have a distance that the aircraft must have been at that particular time from the satellite. And from there, you've got 7 of them, you can work out the flight path. And that's what they did.
Investigators were able to calculate the aircraft's trajectory.
They worked out it was actually in the southeastern quadrant from the satellite, and it meant that every hour they were getting this range circle.
Byron Bailey has been a pilot for over 50 years. He's spent thousands of hours behind the controls of the Boeing 777 and almost the same amount of time studying the final moments of MH370.
5th arc, 6th, 7th.
It was the final handshake. MH370's final resting place is believed to be somewhere along this arc. So what do we know? What are the unarguable facts that we know about MH370?
We know the flight path. We know it not to the accuracy we need to know it, because that will tell us where it crashed. We know that 5 weeks beforehand, Captain Zahari sat down at his computer and he worked out a detailed flight plan. A lot of thought went into it. And that's about it, really.
Zahari Shah was the 53-year-old captain of Flight MH370. He was an experienced senior pilot. He was also married with adult children and grandkids.
He's an intriguing figure. He's got quite a lot of aspects to him. By all accounts, he was a superb pilot, absolutely full of capacity to train others, highly respected, highly liked. He seemed to be a fun guy, by all accounts.
But it's the flying he did at home that raised the alarm. 7 days after MH370's disappearance, Malaysian police found his flight simulator. That's it in the background. On it, investigators found practice flights to the southern Indian Ocean.
The simulated coordinates showed definitely what he had planned, and all he had to do was keep a note of these coordinates. He could put into the flight management computers on the night. It would take him exactly where he had planned to go.
Who plans a flight to go to the middle of nowhere?
Someone was trying to make the aircraft disappear. They did it very well.
Here, at the Haas Aviation Museum, just south of Sydney, former Qantas captain Mike Glenn demonstrates how to reprogram the Boeing 777 flight path.
So we keep the number 4 engine going. We see we've got Route 1 loaded here. That is the actual flight plan that was loaded in Malaysian 370 when it took off. But there is a second route, and this is the actual route that Captain Zahari used. The pink line is Route 1, the blue line is Route 2.
You can see the route flown by Zahari on his home simulator 5 weeks earlier mirrors MH370's final flight.
And so by practicing that flight on his flight simulator, he was practicing what could only be a suicide murder flight.
It was pretty obvious that someone had been in charge of that aircraft. Aircraft do not do the kind of thing that aircraft did unless someone is at the controls.
In 2020, I spoke to Tony Abbott for the first instalment of this investigation. He said he was in no doubt who was responsible.
My very clear understanding from the very top levels of the Malaysian government is that from very, very early on here, they thought it was murder-suicide by the pilot.
They said that to you?
I'm not going to say who said what to whom, but let me reiterate, I want to be absolutely crystal clear. It was understood at the highest levels that this was almost certainly murder-suicide by the pilot, mass murder-suicide by the pilot.
How long after the plane disappeared did
that information become clear to you?
Within a matter of a week or so.
It was a stunning revelation. In private, pilot Zahari Shah was believed to have acted alone. But in public, the Malaysian government had a different story.
Despite media reports that the plane was hijacked, I wish to be very clear. We are still investigating all possibilities as to what caused MH370 to deviate from its original flight path.
I consider Zahari's flight simulator to be probably the most compelling piece of evidence pointing to his culpability.
Jeff Wise is an aviation commentator and podcaster. He says the priority now is to find MH370. Only then can we look for motive.
The thing that we always want to know is, why did that person do that? But when it comes to solving this mystery, it kind of doesn't matter what the motive is. We need to figure out what happened to this plane. The data is going to tell us where the plane went. The wreckage is going to tell us how it impacted if it did go into the ocean. Only after we figure out who is responsible for this act, then we can have the luxury of saying, this is why they did it.
If there is anything down there, we will find it.
Were you looking in the right area?
No.
The underwater search effort has been suspended.
When they called off the search?
It was really tough.
"10 years on, can you believe we're still asking the same questions? Where's the plane?"
Yeah, I don't even know if we've got the right questions yet, actually. Where's the plane is the big question.
It's believed the resting place for Malaysian Airlines Flight 370 is somewhere down there, the vast Indian Ocean. 10 days after it went missing, the search pivoted from the South China Sea to a huge corridor of the Seventh Arc. Millions of square kilometres. The new search came under Australia's jurisdiction.
If there is anything down there, we will find it. We owe it to the families of those people to do no less.
And of course, even when we started working in the right place, it was in extremely deep waters, very difficult terrain, bad weather, day or two's journey to even get to the site, let alone undertake extensive searching. It was very, very difficult.
The priority was finding any surface debris and the all-important black box flight recorder.
Once the aircraft entered the water, you have 30 days from when the transponder on the black box expires, when it runs out of battery.
Peter Waring was a Navy operations manager attached to the search. He's an expert in seafloor mapping and underwater technology.
The power of the signal is so weak that you need to be within 2 kilometres of it to hear it. So if it's in 4,000 metres of water, then you've got to have something that can go down at least 2,000 metres of water and pass right over the top of it.
The challenges were immense, but Peter Waring is confident they didn't miss the aircraft.
Anything man-made we would have been able to find on the bottom of the seafloor, and we covered that area in such a level of detail that I just don't think it's plausible that we missed the aircraft.
Were you looking in the right area?
Well, initially in the southern Indian Ocean, no.
Where to search was determined by the Australian Transport Safety Bureau.
It was based on the fuel range of the aircraft. It was based on the 7 arcs. It was also based on some of the drift modelling that had been done.
But crucially, the ATSB's search area was also based on the assumption that a catastrophic onboard emergency, like a lack of oxygen, killed or incapacitated everyone on board, including the pilot. And the aircraft then flew itself until it ran out of fuel and ultimately crashed. It's known as a ghost flight.
Every pilot I know shakes their head at this invented theory of a hypoxia event over the South China Sea and the plane meandered by itself for 7 hours. Rubbish. You have to reprogram the computer.
So if it was a ghost flight, like the ATSB assumed, how did the aircraft make such a radical change of direction?
We're in cruise at 39,000 feet.
In a Boeing 777 flight simulator, Byron Bailey recreates two potential flight scenarios. The first, a ghost flight.
Okay, left engine is quitting, left engine shut down. 570 knots, that's about 1,000 kilometres an hour. This is going to hurt.
The aircraft spirals out of control and crashes into the ocean.
So you can see the sea coming up. Oh, I hate the visuals.
So that's a big crash.
You would have exploded into millions of bits.
But we ran the simulation again. This time, based on the theory, it was a controlled glide and murder-suicide by the pilot.
Hello, engine's running now. Looks like we have flamed out.
At 40,000 feet and out of fuel, we glide as far as we can.
He would have ditched into wind to keep the speed down as much as possible to avoid a lot of wreckage. So that's what we'll try and do, all right? That's 500 feet before we ditch. Okay, I'll start to flare now. And then we hit the water. We are dead.
So, a controlled glide, as far as the plane could take him,
Yeah.
and it went beyond the search zone. That's your theory.
Yeah.
So where's the plane?
Yeah, I put it at 39 degrees, 8 minutes south, and it's only about 30 or 40 kilometres further south where they did search. And they wouldn't go that far.
This is where Byron Bailey's controlled glide, the murder-suicide theory, places what remains of MH370. And that boxed area is where the search actually took place.
And that's where the Australian government was planning to search. And instead, when the search actually started, it went the other way.
According to Peter Waring, the controlled glide theory wasn't even acknowledged by the Australian search officials.
It wasn't even a conversation about whether someone could stay at the controls at the end. It was just black and white. Absolutely not. It's not possible.
How long into the search was it before you started having serious doubts?
I would say it was about 6 months in. It struck me that as the search went on, we were moving into areas that were less likely and that we had no backup plan. There was no plan B, what to do if the search box had been drawn in the wrong spot. Could we change the search area? And the answer became a very firm no.
Soon after the Indian Ocean search began, former Chief of Defence Sir Angus Houston was brought in to coordinate the operation. I spoke to him in 2020. What did the Malaysian PM tell you about what he thought happened?
He didn't indicate what he thought had happened, and neither did Prime Minister Abbott.
So the Prime Minister at the time never told you
No.
what the Malaysian leader told him?
No.
So murder-suicide never came up?
No.
Just with the benefit of hindsight and the passage of time now, Warren, which scenario do you believe to be true? Was it a controlled glide at the end, or was it a so-called death dive after the plane ran out of fuel?
Well, there's always been trouble about what happened and why it happened. Clearly, a manoeuvre that was undertaken by a human being, they couldn't have made that turn so sharply on any kind of autopilot. One can only assume some of that was premeditated, although the motive for it remains a mystery.
You don't want to say how you think it ended, even all these years on?
I think there's little doubt that the aircraft flew until it ran out of fuel.
And the pilot was not in control at the end, is your working assumption?
I doubt that the pilot was still in control at that time.
In July 2015, thousands of kilometres from the search zone, a 2.7 metre piece of aircraft wing washed up on Reunion Island off the coast of Africa.
It's clearly from an aircraft, and the barnacles indicate it's been in the ocean for some time.
The serial number confirmed. It was part of the right wing of MH370. For the families, it was a bittersweet discovery.
The relief of finding something, so a little bit of evidence, was like, okay, we're in the right place. But the other side of like, oh my Lord, that's our worst fears. We've got a broken wreckage here. It was really tough.
10 years on, and it's still a hotly contested debate. Was the most likely area even searched? It all comes down to MH370's final hours and whether or not the pilot, Zahari Shah, was in control of the aircraft. So basically, to take out all the passengers, all he's had to do is flick a couple of buttons in just a few moments.
Yeah, make sure the door is locked, no one can get in, nothing that anyone can do.
Since the 9/11 attacks on the World Trade Center, commercial air travel and airliner security has been hugely increased. And that especially goes for the airplane cockpit. How do you lock the door? Is that tricky?
It's not. It's designed to keep people out. The door will automatically close and you can lock it by this switch here. And you can also, there's a manual deadbolt on the door that prohibits any sort of entry into the flight deck. You can have a full-on attack on the door. It's not going to change a thing.
Can't get through?
You can't get through.
Wow. While forced entry to an aircraft's cockpit may now be impossible, it is still, however, very possible to cut off the oxygen supply and incapacitate or even kill the passengers on board.
When you open these outflow valves, the aircraft depressurizes very quickly. If the aircraft's not going to descend, you'll be starting to feel a very hypoxic within about 3 or 4 minutes.
I mean, this is grim, but he's turned this cockpit into a killing machine, basically.
It's not meant to do that, but yes, exactly, yeah.
In April 2015, the decision was made to double the search area from 60,000 to 120,000 square kilometres. Peter Waring says search coordinators revealed the plan far too soon.
They asked us for a map, and so we made it quite clear at the time that whatever map we were to show them was provisional, that it wouldn't be the final map of what the 120 looked like. But then they released the map to the press, and so in that one act, I thought at the time that we condemned ourselves to not finding the aircraft.
This is the map that was released. In red, the new area to be searched. In yellow, the area already searched. So when that press release came out with a different search zone to your view, did you feel shafted?
I was pissed off, yeah. I was really pissed off because I remember very clearly caveating that map with, this is not what the final 120,000 will look like.
Almost 3 years after MH370 went missing, the search was officially called off.
It is with some level of sadness, certainly with a great deal of frustration and disappointment that I stand here and acknowledge that the underwater search area effort has been suspended.
When they called off the search, how difficult was that?
Oh, very difficult. You were riding on that hope train for so long for some answers and to find out what the truth was, and it fizzled into nothing.
But 12 months after the initial search ended, unexpectedly, it was back on.
You've got so much hope, and then that dissipates because we haven't got a resolution. And then the next part of hope comes.
Ocean Infinity, a salvage company from America, offered up their flotilla of autonomous vehicles. It was a bold new quest. Using the latest technology, the search area was expanded and explored in record time.
Ocean Infinity had a unique setup on their vessel where they had 8 of these autonomous underwater vehicles, and they were running those at, on 48-hour missions, and they were collecting one every 4 hours. And so just the tempo of operations was so high that they could hoover up the seafloor in no time at all. It took them, I think, 5 months to do what it took the Australian mission, the Australian government search effort, 2 years to do.
They were looking for any abnormalities that might indicate wreckage or debris. But 5 months and 110,000 square kilometres later, the search for MH370 was once again called off, and for now at least, the final time.
It's like Titanic in a lot of ways.
For 73 years, what happened when the Titanic hit bottom had been a mystery.
Do you think you could find it? Are you ready for it?
We're ready. That's our job, to be ready.
The original search. Was it a failure?
Something about their approach was wrong.
I don't think there's any will among the Australian government to go back out there.
Is this the next Titanic? Is that how far this could be before we find the wreckage?
It's like Titanic in a lot of ways. Will it take us 70 years or whatever to find MH370? In that regard, it's a very different mystery.
I think it's more challenging than finding Titanic. Because Titanic, there was a fairly known location. They were able to find Titanic as technology advanced. So it was just a matter of time.
Until this photograph, for 73 years, what happened when the Titanic hit bottom had been a mystery.
The eventual discovery of the Titanic in 1985 turned it into a tourist attraction.
Hi, my name is Stockton Rush. I'm the CEO and founder of OceanGate. Let's take a look at Titan. We are inside the submersible Titan, which is a carbon fiber and titanium sub that can go to the depths of the Titanic.
And so it was in June 2023, when OceanGate Expeditions sent a submersible to the ocean floor to explore what remains of the British ocean liner. For the 5 people on board, there would be no return from this ride of a lifetime.
Because these are really dangerous operations, Pete. I mean, very dangerous.
As the mini-sub slowly headed for the ocean floor, the outside water pressure increased. It eventually became too much for the Titan.
Titan was at about 3,800 meters. That's the wreck of Titanic is at that depth. So you're dealing with a very remote location.
Ed Cassano is the CEO of Pelagic Research Services. His team played a crucial role in locating the Titan. Unlike MH370, they had a rough idea of where the mini-sub was.
We knew we were diving in the area where the submarine had been operating. So, hopefully the submarine was intact and in the general area where they were last known to be.
Even with a defined search area, it was still a huge challenge.
You're on a very large ship, you're in the big ocean, basically, and now you have to get your equipment to the seafloor. The complications occur with depth. Depth is a challenge. We're talking high pressure, cold temperature. It is completely dark down there.
Nearly 4 kilometres below the surface of the Atlantic Ocean, they discovered debris from the OceanGate sub. The mission had turned from rescue to recovery.
It was extremely emotional, extremely emotional. I had several moments of silence where we not only acknowledged where we were on the site of Titanic's loss, but now, of course, it was the loss of the Titan submersible and their crew as well. And it was, I felt it was very important to take the time several times during the operation to acknowledge both those tragedies.
Do you sympathise with the challenges that those folks who were searching for MH370 in an entirely different ocean had?
Absolutely. Pete, one thing that I think in our search for Titan, that when we found the debris fairly quickly, it brought closure to, it was tragic, not the outcome we wanted, but there was closure, and it was closure quickly. So my heart, it goes out to, even today, to the families of the passengers on MH370, for closure.
It took just 4 days to find the Titan. MH370 has been missing for a decade, which begs the question, what state would the all-important black box flight recorders be in today? How reliable would they be after so much time?
Well, I guess that's unprecedented. We haven't recovered these types of instruments from the ocean floor, from that depth, after 10 years, and neither has anyone in the world. So these two,
the ATSB's Angus Mitchell demonstrates.
So this one here is the cockpit voice recorder, and this is the flight data recorder. So
these are the same recorders that were on MH370. If they can be found, the mystery may finally be solved.
So they're crash survivable and fire survivable and flooding survivable up to a point.
And these damaged recorders are a good example of just how robust this technology is.
These particular ones were taken off a 737 that crashed in Western Australia and burnt at most likely over 1100 degrees for more than half an hour.
Wow.
Now, there was a lot of work that went into not only extracting them, but then rebuilding the chips to be able to download the information. And we did get 100% off those.
So what's the difference between excessive heat and excessive depth?
In the case of MH370, you've not only got the collision forces potentially with the water, then you've got it sitting at
extreme
a depth of
pressure,
4,000 to 6,000 metres for the best part of a decade.
So with this example, this at least proves that you're in the game, right?
The capability certainly exists, but it certainly depends on the state that we get them, and I guess we don't know until they're recovered.
It's been 10 years. It's time to acknowledge that everything has failed, but that not everything has been tried. And there are steps that remain to be taken. We need to not treat this as a closed case. This case needs to be solved. We need to do everything we can. I always say about MH370, the closer you look, the weirder it gets. So if you want a simple explanation, I say look closer.
Was it a failure? Was it a failure by the ATSB, the original search?
Well, it certainly failed to find the aircraft. So, it certainly wasn't a success by that definition.
So you've been handed the greatest aviation mystery of all time. Why not just do another search?
Well, look, I think that the reality in these things is that a lot of effort was spent at the time, a lot of money was spent, a lot of personnel from around the globe, and it was unsuccessful. Now, in the event of new and credible evidence, then potentially it's reopened.
And in a major development, that evidence may have been recently discovered.
Well, of course it can be found. It's a matter of time. There have been ships lost that are found after hundreds of years.
As the world marks the 10th anniversary of MH370's disappearance, the deep sea exploration outfit, Ocean Infinity, says it has new data that could help find the plane.
They are ready and they have finalized the proposal, and we are ready to discuss the proposal.
That's led to the government of Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, a relative of pilot Zahari Ahmed Shah, to say it will launch a new search if compelling new evidence is uncovered.
Our Minister of Transport have announced clearly that we have a compelling case to reopen the investigations. We will. And I'm inclined to support reopening of the investigations of MH370.
I think the Malaysians want something really compelling.
Evidence, you mean?
Yeah,
beforehand?
new. I mean, I think the wording that was released as the search wound down was new and compelling.
You need to go out there to find that.
Yeah,
though,
we
don't
need
you?
to go out there to find it. I think that's very true. But I think what we have at the moment is just a reinterpretation of pre-existing data. So it technically isn't new. And so depending on how the Malaysians seek to interpret that phrase, there's a chance that we might not ever have approval from them to go back out there. But then the question becomes, do we need approval from the Malaysians to go back out there? I think the answer to that is probably. It would be better if you did, but ultimately if they're unwilling to allow the search to continue or to support another search, then I think we go without it.
The Australians mean?
I don't think there's any will among the Australian government to go back out there.
But at the Australian Transport Safety Bureau, Angus Mitchell remains resolute.
But at the moment, we've exhausted our resources based on what we know. And until that changes, well then I guess that's where we are today.
But there is still a willingness, even though it's on ice.
Well, there's always a willingness, but it's also to understand the complexities we're asked to do it in.
If there is anything down there, we will find it. We owe it to the families of those people to do no less.
Now, you remember back in the day, the government promised we will not stop until we find this plane. Well, they didn't find the plane, and they did stop. And I'm saying there's still stuff left to do. Here's your marching orders. Please go do this.
How much of this should be on the Malaysians, though, and not the Australians to go out and do another search, or even the Chinese for that matter?
To be clear, I'm not saying they should go do another search. Just do us a solid and explain to us where the plane could be, all of the possibilities where the plane could be, even the ones that you excluded going in. Because, you know, very famously, an Australian minister said, we have defined the search area that encompasses 97% probability for this plane went. They searched that area, it wasn't there, they doubled it again. Their math was wrong. Something about their approach was wrong. So they need to figure out, they need to explain where we went wrong. They've never done that.
Jeanette Maguire thinks of her sister every day. Here at her home in Brisbane, there's a constant reminder that the plane must be found so Kathy can finally be laid to rest.
There are a lot of experts who've been critical of the search. As a family member of a victim, were you satisfied that they did the best job that they could?
Yeah, I am, yes. I'm satisfied that with what little evidence they had to go on, that they did absolutely the best that they could. Very grateful, absolutely grateful for everything everybody's done.
Totally agree. I think we were very well supported throughout this horrible ordeal. And when they were, going through that search of the Indian Ocean, they brought up, all the charts and things and went through it as thoroughly as they could. Totally embraced every moment of their time.
When I first met Jeanette Maguire, I asked her about the man who was flying the plane, Captain Zahari Ahmed Shah. Do you feel anger towards the pilot?
No,
Why not?
because I don't know he did it. I can't lay blame until I know the truth.
Even though a lot of evidence supports the theory that it was the pilot.
Correct? I can't do it. I can't lay blame where I don't know the fact.
Jeanette, when I spoke to you a couple of years ago, you were still willing to give the pilot the benefit of the doubt.
Huh?
Because you didn't know for sure what happened.
Correct.
Do you still have that view?
Yes, I do. I still can't blame someone unless I've got that evidence. It's just not in my DNA. Just to knowing what we've gone through, his family will be going through the same thing. And on top of that, they're having to live with blame, and we don't know who did it. I believe somebody was flying that plane, but who? It might not have been him. There could have been a hijacker on board. There could have been anything. So until we find the plane and we get the evidence of who, then we can do the blame. But not until then.
By some estimates, a new search for the missing plane would cost in excess of $100 million. Ed Cassano says he's willing to send his underwater rover, the Odysseus 6K, to take a look. Do you think you could find it?
It would be challenging. I'm not going to say definitively one way or the other. We would be challenged like any organization. Would we, welcome the challenge? Sure.
So if you get another phone call, this time relating to the Southern Indian Ocean, are you ready for it?
We're ready. That's our job, to be ready.
For the families who still don't know what happened to their loved ones, it's money that has to be spent.
I want the closure for myself, my sisters, and for my family as well, so they can also have that process, like that grieving process. Because I feel like for me, it's every time it keeps getting brought up, it just keeps rehashing for me that those memories are lost.
Eileen, why is it so important that they get out there and go again?
Well, I think not only us, our family, all the other families that are involved, but I think anybody that gets on an aeroplane would like to know that if something happened to them, that you would be able to find those people, find what happened, know what happened to them. So that's why it's very important, I think, yes.
Yeah, we need to know when we travel that we're going to get to our destination. There's always a risk in life. You drive your car, on a plane, boat, whatever. But this is massive. This is a massive trauma event that's happened to so many people in one time. And it just feels like no one cares. That thought's gone. It's old news. It's 10 years. But we have to keep searching. It's not fair.
All we got to do is for the Australian government to say, okay, the government back in 2014 screwed up. They made a big mistake. We commit to a new search at some time in the future because it's got to be found. It cannot just keep going. A huge Boeing 777 cannot just disappear.